Look back into your personal human experience and think about the connection between play and your internal state. How do you feel? And when you feel that way, how do you perform? Do you have experiences of feeling amazing and performing poorly?
I wanted to, well, first, just thank you for making time to do this. And it's been such a pleasure to get to know you over our last conversation on your podcast. And then also getting to research you and study you and listen to conversations with you. And it's like a breath of fresh air, your level of genuine interest and authenticity. And then intelligence and just the level of investment that you've put into your craft, and then also in tandem, your investment in maybe not even investment, just your natural innate interest in other people is really it's something, you know.
Thank you.
I wonder, where do you think, is that a muscle that a person can develop? Like interest and engagement in, I don't know, life, people, subjects.
What's that? There's a saying, I'm going to butcher it, but it's like, if you want to be interesting, be interested. It seems like it's been somewhere in my past. I read someone smart said that, so I don't know if it's a thing or if it's something made up. But I have a desire historically to understand people, mostly because if you think about the range of human emotions, experiences, opportunities, that is couched in human beings, right? It's not couched in trees or in mountains, or there's all kinds of benefits for trees and mountains and pets and whatnot. But the human experience is couched in speaking with other humans, in reading books and listening to stories and consuming art that humans make, right? That is how human experience is basically shared and unfolds in front of other humans. So as a person who wants to maximize the richness, the engagement, the fulfilling feelings that we can get from life, it seems like that's where all the riches are buried, right? In humans. And you know, I'm, as we all can, only really connect the dots looking backwards. I think I realized that in early on in my career, when I realized that I am compelled to be an artist, a creator, an entrepreneur, and to have been inspired by reading the stories of entrepreneurs and artists and who had predated or precluded me. It's like, oh my gosh, there's so much wisdom and knowledge and, you know, opportunity distilled in lessons that other people have already learned. Like, that's a great place to start. That's a great place to harvest. And then it turns out that that's actually a great vehicle for cultivating another thing that I have discovered in my universe, the idea of community. And if you are interested in connecting with other people, you learn from them, you're willing and excited to be a student of them and their work, then, and you share that work, that almost by definition cultivates community, because then you're sharing that with other people and connecting other people with this work as basically a connector. And it turns out that we are social creatures, and that has a whole nother benefit to whatever it is that you want to do or be or become in this world. People want to help you if they know that you're, you know, helping other people in the process, and if you want to share what you learned with them. So there's this sort of it unlocks some flow of information that is seen as, you know, by humanity as, this is valuable, therefore I want to pay attention. And this idea of humans and of building community, turns out that's good for everything. It's good for human connection. It's good for health and happiness and fitness and business and all, you know, all these things. So yeah. It is not, it is intentional now because I've recognized it as a strength, and it started out just generally and genuinely as like, this is where all the best of the human experience is embedded. And if we can go learn from that and then apply it, you know, internally, boy, that's like a superpower.
I think it's interesting. There's like so many different ideas that came to mind as you were sharing. I'm like, but I think where I'm at is life feels kind of like almost like a game in a way, maybe it's a simulation, but it's like, the Joseph Campbell hero's journey. Like it feels like, you ever play Zelda growing up? You get the ocarina, and then you get like the Excalibur sword. I might be making the Excalibur part up, but you get like the different versions of swords, and you like level up as you go. And the thing that's coming to mind as you're speaking is like the answers to everything that you could ever want to know or feel or experience exists in people.
And that's the only place it exists. There is both something comforting and awesome to recognize that. It's comforting to know, well, it's valuable to be able to ask other people their experiences and learn without, I don't have to touch a hot stove to know that the stove is hot. I can ask somebody else who touched it. And by extension, it makes you feel less alone or less like isolated, or to know that you're experiencing, there's ultimately a reasonably narrow range of emotions and experiences, and you can learn in advance of that or while you're going through it, and it helps you process, it helps you manage, it helps you master, it helps you navigate, it helps you do all these the verbs, these verbs to experience the human experience, which is cool.
Yeah. And as you start to gain relationships and your community grows and such, which, that's just inherent in being of service. If you're continually in service to enough people, with time, the way that I've described it or visualized in the past is almost thinking of it like a matrix. And, when you start off and you're young, you just have a couple little strands coming off the matrix, and they're kind of disparate and disconnected. And you're just like, you feel alone. You're like, man, like nothing really just happens for me. And as you go, every moment, every day, that there's a bunch of opportunities to be of service to others. And that leaves an imprint. And every imprint that you leave with a new person, suddenly that matrix, it's like a tree, it starts to grow and become more robust and integrated. And then those nodes or those branches of the tree, they start talking to each other. And they say, oh yeah, Chase, he helped me with that. Oh man, he's so good. Oh, he's the best. And then, whoa, now you're in the fabric. And I wonder, what do you think about that?
Everything you said is like exclamation point, yes. And then there's something else cool that layers in there, which it's exponential. That's like I just got chills when you recognize that all of those, that like not just conceptually exponential. I mean, like literally the definition of if you're planting all these seeds and these seeds are growing and the seeds are planting their own seeds, the seeds become trees and the trees give off their own seeds, like this, and in internet circles, it's probably called networking, but in a social science setting, it's like exponential human connection. Yeah. And, networking is not at all, I never use that word. I don't think of it as that. And in fact, when it has been said in business circles in the past, I'm like this, I'm not at this event to give out as many, date myself here, 19, give out as many business cards as possible. Right. I'm here to like actually, learn and connect and share. It is interesting. When you say it's like compounding, right? It's like financially compounding interest is how all, investments, they really pay off. And the same is true. And I would even say maybe more so in the arena of human capital.
I wonder, as far as going in direction of like actionable takeaway information, things of the sort, what do you think differentiates a person that has had a pretty, they've been able to integrate well compared to a person that just isn't being able to figure it out, and they're still late 30s, 40s, whatever, or just whatever, any age. And it's like, I can't seem to crack into this social group or this, just that like my ideas aren't coming off of the ground. I don't have and then there's some other people that it's like, they've just seemingly organically, effortlessly been able to grow through, that matrix, and they're starting to get this exponential return where people want to be supportive to them. And like, what is the difference between those two? Is there any standouts that you could potentially, like bullet points of sorts or ideas?
I do think that this comes more naturally to some rather than others, as in the way that, being a gifted athlete may, or being a gifted thinker, or, there are some, I think, some natural gifts at work. But I think what's more interesting, and the takeaway ought to be, that this is a knowable, learnable thing, and specifically the awareness that this is possible or this is happening, and a willingness to engage with that is that's the real takeaway. And it's like, if you find yourself, not on, well, first of all, if you see yourself not in that arena as someone who has benefited from that, have you done any work in that arena? The belief is that everyone who has that has it naturally, and that you either have it or you don't. The reality is single digit % of people are probably truly gifted. The reality is that probably 70% or 80% of the rest of the percentage of people who would be, would be considered to have benefited in that universe have actually recognized it and put work in. I have a friend, Vanessa Van Edwards. She's
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was just with her 5 days ago.
There you go. So Vanessa's down in Austin, down near you. She's a dear friend. She has studied, as she's a behavioral psychologist, and she has studied human behavior. And if you think about this as charisma, for example, it's more, I'm just kind of like brutalizing this a little bit because it's community and integrity, and, there's all kinds of, things at work here. But if we just try and simplify it to charisma, that it's learnable. And she's documented it's a thing, and it's like, there's 10 bullet points, and if you do these 10 things, then by definition you have charisma. Of course, we're not talking about charisma. We're talking about something that's a little bit more dynamic and three-dimensional or four-dimensional than that. But the point is if you are on the other side, or you perceive yourself, it's like, have you put any work in? Are you willing to? Because that's where a lot of value in life is. In this, we are social animals, whether you like it or not. And this has nothing to do with being an introvert or an extrovert. This is human connection is required. Babies that do not get human connection die, just to be blunt. So it's not a like, oh yeah, I don't really need that, or I don't benefit from that. People who have invested in that area will disproportionately benefit, whether you're naturally gifted or not. And not dissimilar to your world, are you invested in how you feel physically, in how you move through the world, in your physical level of physical health? Have you spent and paid attention to that? If so, you tend to get disproportionate benefits, and if not, you likely don't get that benefit. And I think the same thing is true here.
Yeah, I think we can. It's easy to get mired by or wrapped up in like hard skills, and quantifiable skills and such. But I think that there's a whole nother aspect of our lives. It's like an iceberg kind of thing. You have like the tip of the iceberg, the things that you see.
Yep.
And then there's the vast majority of it, which is everything that lies beneath. And I think that's the oftentimes the differentiating factor between a person it seems like life just goes easier for them. It's like there's like this lubrication in the gears with the person, and it's like uncovering what that is very interesting to me.
Well, let me layer in something that is. This is what I truly believe in a roundabout way. This may get us, orient those who are not familiar with me or my work here on your show. I believe that what we are talking about is a creative process. You are creating your experience, your human experience. And notice the human experience is not happening to me. I am creating it. And it may be, I may need to say I'm co-creating it because I'm interacting with other things. I don't want to project some solipsistic universe. What solipsism means, for those who don't know, is that there's only one mind. It's me, and everything else is made up by me. So if you can agree that I am interacting with the world, that I am creating the experience that I'm having. I am doing work, and that work is reflecting benefits, and there are, some good things happen, some bad things happen, but it's very much how I'm responding to them. What I believe is everything we've been talking about here, whether it's developing individual skills, the skill of, the physical skills that you talked about, or they're demonstrable hard skills, or these soft skills, and whether you're developing your life experience or not, these are creative actions. And the irony is that if one wants to be better at creating your life experience, a follow-on question is like, well, how do I get better at that? The reality is, how do you build any muscle? You do it more often, right? If you want to get good at bicep curls, you curl weights with your biceps more often and they will get stronger. So by extension, if life, this thing that we're talking about, life with a capital L, requires this creative act, which creativity with a capital C, what are the muscles that you use? Oh, you know what? It turns out that you just bring more creativity into your life every day. You get good at creating. Because I believe 3 fundamental principles, I wrote them down in a book that we can get to or not get to, called Creative Calling. It's A, everybody is creative. B, that creativity is a muscle. And C, it's only through creating in small, daily, regular ways, whether that's a business, a life, a conversation, music, art, anything where you're creating on a regular basis. It's through creating in small, daily ways that you understand that you can create the life that you have. It's the same muscles. It's just operating at a different scale. So you're not going to get life, you're not going to be able to create the life you want if you do not fundamentally see yourself as an agent in your own making.
Yeah. And so the reason that I'm starting kind of coming from the place of the difference between like hard skills and soft skills and community and relationships and feeling support, and I think that that's foundational to assist a person in getting out of survival mode and a reactionary state, and to open up the bandwidth and spaciousness to connect these seemingly disparate associations or connections, to create something new, because you actually feel like safe enough to do so. But as long as a person's in this reactionary state, I think all you can do is just keep your head above water, just get the bills paid, and just like, and it's really, I think I would imagine it'd probably be hard to be in a creative state within that. And then in relation to Creative Calling, your book, it's one of those interesting kind of mysterious, elusive things, creativity. And I think it's the foundation for almost everything that really at least moves us. I was going to say everything that matters, but at least moves us. And so being able to hold that and kind of objectify it and say like, okay, like this is creativity. And this is, I appreciate you creating the manual for us to be able to hone in on that. And I wonder, as for starters, in relation to that specifically, do you feel, where do people end up doing themselves a disservice in relation to their own propagation and development of creativity? Because it's this spontaneous thing that comes, and you're, the muse has come. Like, where are we shooting ourselves in the foot with that and preventing the possibility for creativity to emerge?
Excellent question. And it is the reason that I started writing about it, because it's a great vehicle for people to understand. Storytelling is powerful, and doing so in a manual, as you said. Most of the books about creativity that I had seen in the past either, thought of it as like popsicle sticks and glitter, or, as something you did in elementary school, or, and didn't have a broad enough definition, or were entirely discounted. And the way that I see most people shoot themselves in the foot is by adopting the dominant cultural narrative, which is, I will say, is rapidly shifting. But, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when I really started trying to make this an idea in popular culture, that no, creativity is not just a nice to have. It's like the thing that underpins a solution to every problem we will ever know. And it is the master skill. It is, once you recognize that it's only through creating in small, lightweight, regular daily ways that you can develop the muscles in order to create the most important and valuable experiences in your life. Like, that was an aha for me. And so the fundamental mistake that most people make is thinking that it's popsicle sticks and glue, and that it is just a nice to have, that's some soft skill that, that is, only bestowed on a few people in school that were anointed by their teachers at, good at drawing or something, and that it requires you to move to Paris and don the beret and smoke the cigarette, and that it's for everybody else. But the reality is actually just the opposite. It is so fundamental. It's as fundamental as, almost as, water and food to the human experience. Because if you do not understand, you do not perceive yourself as having agency, and you're willing to just be a cork in the tide, then you sort of deserve wherever you end up. Versus this, the taking an active role, recognizing that it is a worthwhile endeavor to apply effort toward things that matter to you, whether those are relationships or whether those are, goals or any accomplishment or experience that you want to have. Like manifesting through action, taking action that's the vehicle. So, that's that's the foundations. People think it's one thing and it's really not. And, creativity with a capital C is combining new ideas and experiences to make to existing things to make something new and useful, and just doing that over and over. So once you start to expand, I have yet to, on any of the, hundreds of podcasts I've been on or stages or whatever, not have someone say, if you expand the definition of creativity in the way that you're talking about it, Chase, then I still don't see the utility. It's just the opposite. It's like, okay, I buy that I have a role in trying to cultivate, the human experience that I want. And if that is in fact creation, or at least co-creation, you engaging with the universe, then shit, you're right. I have to acknowledge my own creativity and get to work.
How does a person, it feels like we almost could use some form of rehabilitation from being in a structured kind of like institutional educational upbringing, where it's to no fault of any individual, but the system as a whole has kind of formed around the convenience of teaching to a test. And there's lots of individual teachers that are not that way at all, and they're like passionate, and they're really infusing this zest and zeal for life and curiosity, and then the system that they're working within is teaching to a test, and you want to get you want to get funding, and you want to make sure everyone answers the right sequence of A, D, E, F, K. And so that it's very interesting, because a young, and I've heard you say this before as well, but like a young person, if you tell them to get up and draw a picture on a chalkboard, if they're, in kindergarten or whatever, it's like, hell yeah, like, woo, like, let's see where it goes.
Yep.
And then you start to become indoctrinated with this shame or fear, not doing it right, or not being perfect, or not being, essentially being somebody else, or regurgitating someone else's response, because of, all of the reasons. How does a person start to rehabilitate one's mind or their children's mind, or et cetera?
I love the concept of rehabilitation. I love it. I haven't used that term for it. I think it's an adequate term, appropriate term maybe. You said it in there, and I'll restate it expressly because I think it's important. There is no evil genius who's trying to subvert your human experience or your growth.
Yeah.
There is a series of systems that were developed starting thousands of years ago, but certainly hundreds, and definitely in the previous century, where the system of bringing our children along in a society and a culture was done to serve an end. It was done to create good employees, to learn a skill, to stand on an assembly line and work in a factory. And the way that we could do that in a mass culture is everybody went to the same building, and those who were of similar age went to one room within that building and moved through a bunch of material at the same rate, and then came out. Essentially, it is a factory, right? It is an assembly line. And this, ironically, this is well documented that our current school system was based largely on the factory, industrialization, and the farm. We go to school during these hours and we have summers off it was because you needed to go work in the fields. So, the whole learning system was, and if, for those who don't know, I'm the founder of an online learning platform called CreativeLive, which is where, tens of millions of people have learned a lot of these soft skills: photography, design, filmmaking, entrepreneurship, building businesses and whatnot. So I've studied the education system a lot and built a platform to address it specifically. But it wasn't an evil genius that said, we're going to keep these people down. It was like, what works? Oh, we see how a factory works over here. We're going to make humans do the same to the factory. And lo and behold, it turns out that people who go through the factory experience, that's what they start to understand work is. So then they do become better workers in factories. Well, the irony is that we're still educating people with that paradigm, but the work world, the world of potential human experience is very nonlinear now. It is not, you go to this school and then you go to this school and then you go to this school and then you get this job. And if you get this job and you work for 40 years, then you get the gold watch and then you retire. Like, and that's not to disparage that, but that is the paradigm of the previous, basically 200 years. Yeah. So what it's now, the jobs that most people who are listening to this show right now are going to have in 10 years are jobs that literally do not even exist today. So it's, we not only do we need a different system, one where it's largely self-directed and it's multidimensional versus the linear, you come in the factory at this age and with this widget, and you come out the other end of the factory with X number of skills, and then you go live your life. We need the world that we live in is so dynamic now that we need an equally dynamic system to create the kind of human beings that we want to populate our societies. And that's just, there's a complete disconnect now. And this often happens, right? There's a lag between the ability to make a system that is the best for such a, at this scale, and, its ability to deliver the results. There's a huge lag time there, and that's what we're experiencing. And what's cool is what I know about your show and the longtime show that I've hosted, and going back to this idea of why would you care about humans, and especially high performing humans, and why would you read books? And it's because if you look at those people, and right now everyone has people they look up to and respect and admire, whether they're their neighbor or Michael Jordan or Roxane Gay or any internet person that you say, man, they're speaking the truth. The reality is that they have largely escaped the paradigm that we're talking about. They are living this, and they are living it in advance of the majority of the people that are in this ecosystem. And that's one of the reasons that I think we're interested in that. Like, they figured something out. I'm not quite sure what it is, but that's interesting. And then if you look largely at the way that they have learned, which is what I've done, in my writings, in my lifelong work as an artist, and what CreativeLive does, is it deconstructs the success of the most happy and successful and, importantly, fulfilled people. And there are patterns. They have not necessarily subscribed to this life is linear, you're born, you work, then you die mentality. And it is seen as exponential. It is a growth mindset rather than a closed mindset. And shit, you start to see that's what's happening right now. You've seen the creator movement, right? We're seeing an exponential expansion of the collective creativity. Look at the companies that are the most successful and differentiated. They operate in a special and different way. They have some fundamental principles that they adhere to, but there is a creativity embedded in the very existence. And shit, people are figuring it out. And the hope, my hope in writing and, going on your show is to share this with people and help them feel empowered and inspired. Like, oh man, I have to take a role in my own experience. By taking action, it doesn't mean that I don't make mistakes. In fact, it's just the opposite, that I'm going to make tons of mistakes. But the goal isn't avoiding mistakes. The goal is recovering quickly. And this is what, failure or trial and error or iteration looks like. And it's critical to, again, this successful, happy, and most importantly, fulfilled life.
Yeah. A part of my creative venture in this lifetime is associating seemingly seemingly disparate topics such as creativity back to movement, and back to health and back to biological well-being and such. And I think some of the conversations that a person may have would be like, oh, like creativity is like Steve Jobs or like Gary Vee or someone that's like kind of in a category of like, okay, like they're making apps and businesses and it's kind of like mind to paper, mind to technology. And it's, like that's creativity. Or an artist, could be the obvious one, or music or something of the sort. But then when you look at the effect of something like play, for example, it's like an embodied experience. Suddenly that opens up a person to all of these different realms of themselves at, a mental, emotional, even neuronal level. There's a book that you'd probably appreciate called Play by Stuart Brown, Dr. Stuart Brown. I reference him in my book a bunch of times in the play chapter. And he describes it as activating these, what he calls superfluous neurons, where it's like we don't really know the function, they're kind of disconnected, but through play, this very specific medium of play, there's no purpose, it's just exploration for the sake of exploration and joy for the sake of joy, not trying to get any kind of outcome of it. Suddenly that starts to, the physical embodied expression of play starts to have this mental, emotional, neuronal integration to allow the expression of new ideas. It's just so fucking cool.
It's so cool. But let's take this for a moment. I love where you're going here, and let's take it for a moment. Okay. Look, I want everyone who's listening, if you're jogging down the path, you might need to walk for a second, but I want you to do this. And maybe if you're sitting in traffic, this will be good. Like, look back into your personal human experience and think about the connection between play and your internal state. How do you feel? And when you feel that way, how do you perform? Do you have experiences of feeling amazing and performing poorly? Most people don't. Most people have the experience of, when I feel good, I am more apt to perform better. And by performance, I mean you're a better husband, wife, chef, worker, partner, performing, meaning all of those things. If play cultivates, these feelings of well-being and experiments and experiences, and it's in those moments and experiences that you feel most alive and connected and both aware of yourself and sort of divorced from any hyper awareness of any one thing, like, oh, I'm standing in front of people or whatever. You're like, you are simultaneously just it's like a flow state. Mm-hmm. That is when you perform the best. So there's this direct connection between the things that you're talking about there and what I'm saying, this underpinning of creativity. And I want to specifically talk to a subset of potential listeners right now. Again, I like the connection you made to movement and play, because I think it's very contributory. But for people who have used the phrase, like, I'm not that creative, like, that is a conditioned response based on the belief that creativity is popsicle sticks and glitter and that you can draw a good portrait from 9th grade or 6th grade or whatever. That is not the definition of creativity. And if you can expand this idea of creativity and you do acknowledge that it is when you are playing or are creating that, and to be fair, we're co-creating this experience right now, right? You and I, because if you interrupted me, we would go a different direction. If you had another idea, like, we're co-creating that. So if you can, this person who thinks you might not be creative, if you can extend me the willingness to acknowledge this, it's very difficult to then have a counter argument that creativity is useless. If you can accept that creativity is these things and eschew this idea that I'm not creative because creativity, you are using the wrong sense of the word, or the word is changing, then isn't that awesome? All of a sudden you may be 10,000 hours away from a goal, but you're also just one decision away from starting the process. Yeah. And that is remarkably inspiring to me.
Yeah. Well, it's like you can, so many people, they come to a point, there's a term for this that I'm not remembering right now, but they come to a point of reaching their final goal, their final destination. They went to the moon, they won the Olympic gold medal, the thing they've been working towards for their whole life, and then immediately following that, they fall into this deep depression, and they're like, well, now I have no purpose, and I'm like who am I, and what do I do? And so it was in fact the journey to the goal that was the thing. The goal was actually a disappointment.
For most people, it lasts, like a second.
It lasts a second, and then it's like, I've had that sensation with certain digital numbers clicking over to a thing that, years ago I'd be like, oh man, when that comes, and then it finally comes and you're like, absolutely nothing, like nothing.
No juice there.
Like,
yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
No
So
juice.
I think a person, it's just the stories we tell ourselves. And I think there's the opportunity to engage in play and in exploration and all that, and like literally everything that we're doing, even the most like banal kind of linear structured things that we're doing, there's still the opportunity to infuse a little bit of play into that. And then suddenly I think from there it potentiates the opportunity for new growth in ways that we wouldn't had we stayed stuck in an old story of this is the way it is and this is the way it has to be, and there's no potential flexibility. I don't have a question, but
No, not even potential. That's the only way that you get out of that, right? Is recognizing it, because otherwise it's just momentary experiences of bliss for which you had no role and you can learn nothing from. If you change the script, right, the most important words in the world are the ones we say to ourselves. And if you're constantly programming yourself, you might as well program yourself with the idea that, that I am creating this experience right now, even if I'm only creating the attitude that I have about what I am experiencing. In the case of grief, for example, or something you're angry about or frustrated, like, look at the level that we're talking about. We're talking about fundamental human neurology and emotions, and this is some base level shit we're talking about here. And I'm tying it back to, creativity, and we're able to make the connection between your neurology and how you move, and that these things are tied together, I think is fascinating. And as I have spent most of my life, you opened this, the show today with like talking about how, what is it about, people who have been able to fill in the blank. I've just been deconstructing, the most happy and successful and fulfilled high performers. And this is what I've realized is that this is the, of the things that are common, the pattern is that they recognize that they are an agent in this, that they have a role in it, that and that's not to say that self-talk isn't always positive, because we know that we are human, and but fundamentally the pattern is that there's an acknowledgement that they can create the future that they want for themselves, and by extension any number of small things along the way.
There's also something sometimes a little bit, I don't know, like paradoxical perhaps, of a lot of the people that we aspire to be more like would fall into a category of like high performer, which that word is, I think that word's a bit fraught with issues in and of itself, just like on the face, just the terminology. So I wonder with you, just on a more like personal level, because you would fall into that category. You're a person that's like well respected all around the planet. It's like your accolades are vast and high. I wonder what is like hard for you in your life?
This is going to it's going to seem abstract, but I think it's very fundamental. And I place a lot of value on the idea of awareness, because at the end of the day, the only thing that we really have is our attention. Right. And you've heard, we can throw around the idea of, being self-aware is a very powerful skill, or someone who would be defined as charismatic. They are aware of how they are feeling and how what they are saying, feeling, doing makes you feel. And, and at this at the very base level, again, I like to go down to first principles, and it's sort of, what do we have? Like in this life, what do we have? We really have attention. And if attention is, awareness, where we place our awareness, right now I'm placing it on you. I'm going to make sure that we're delivering value to you, to your community, or or when I'm, performing a skill, whether that's for work or for pleasure or for joy, my attention is on that thing. And so when you ask, what do I struggle with? The ability to be in the moment, to be truly present is, I believe, sort of this master skill on par with creativity. It's sort of like awareness is the true base of the pyramid, and the next one is creativity. Do you have the ability to bring to bear experiences and people and ideas to, combine them to make something new, and that thing that is new actually is what propels you to have the human experience that you are desiring. So for me, the ability to stay mindful during any activity is, when we get angry at someone who pulled out in front of us, it's usually because we fell out of the moment and we're thinking about this person, who they must be, and we're thinking about why the reason we're really angry is because we're late, and why were we late? So we're living in the future, we're going to be late, or we're living in the past, that guy wronged me just a moment ago. And none of that has anything to do with actual being. So I find that my weakness, and the areas when I look at people who I truly respect and appreciate and admire, they have this insane ability to stay present. And I don't like, we'll agree to throw rocks at the idea of high performers, because high performer tends to mean that you're achieving some goal. But if you can look at performing the act of human being, right, of actually being, nobody does it better than the monk. And the monk is entirely present, right? Yeah. Ram Dass, sitting in the moment, be here now. That's not about, what's going to happen for dinner tonight, or, oh my gosh, I was so mean to that person at the grocery store. It's like the joy of being. That's, I think, the highest, potentially our highest and most valuable state. So yeah, I'm in a lifelong pursuit of that. My wife is a meditation and a mindfulness teacher. So I am a student of, and she's way better at this than I am. So I'm constantly, that's where I put a lot of work. Put a lot of work there.
It's like the most gorgeous expression of a performance typically is the byproduct of getting out of the way of yourself. Again, more paradox. It's like the more you Alan Watts has a bit where he talks about teaching a kid how not to stutter. And if you're like, and he's like, da, 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 and you're like, concentrate. He's like, oh, okay, good. It's like, that's not how, it just makes it worse. Yeah. So it's being able to like hold the unholdable in a way. It feels like that's creativity. It's very strange.
Right. But this is why meditation, we've used the analogy of, if you want to get better at creating your life, then have more creative pursuits, because you get used to what it feels like to build that muscle. And, by extension, the idea of, now this is very philosophical, and I'll have to apologize. I dropped out of a PhD program in philosophy, so this may get a little heady, but no, I'm a dropout though, just to be clear. So.
Me too. Actually, same thing. Yeah.
The idea,
not PhD, but yeah.
The idea, but what meditation does, meditation is the act of trying to be present. And it is the act of it's when your mind wanders. Meditation is literally the act of refocusing your attention on. That's why we have things like, you focus on breathing, or focus on a mantra, or ideally there's nothing. You're focusing on just being, and not the grocery list, not your parking ticket, not anything else. It's just when your mind wanders, bring it back. And that is a muscle, right? And so by extension, the idea of being able to be here now. And if you're the kid not thinking about trying to not stutter, but just being, that's why this is so foundational. It is as foundational as, this idea that I'm trying to espouse here, creativity. And that's why meditation is valuable. That is why, at least I appreciate the range of human emotion, but I feel so much better when I'm at a very, sort of calm and centered place, and I don't lash out when someone pulls out in front of me, and I don't when something in business goes awry. And this is where, Stoicism and Buddhism are very, very similar, right? A lot of rage about Stoicism now. Our dear friend Ryan Holiday, like the Stoic says, just react to what is, not what you wanted it to be or what it was. Just, it's very much an activity of presence and awareness, which I think it's powerful. You see all these different schools of thought when you start to look at the Venn diagram. A lot of them, it's like prayer, awareness, meditation, mindfulness, stoicism, just the Venn diagram, it points at the things that we're talking about in this conversation.
When you're creating Creative Calling, your book, it's kind of interesting because it's kind of probably a bit of pressure in a way. Like you're leveraging the muscles of creativity to create this creation.
That was not lost on me at all. That was a mind F for me the whole time I'm writing.
So when you're in that scenario, and we have to do, I'm very much excited to record a conversation in person, by the way.
Yes, we will.
Because I'm like, oh, we're winding down. But yeah, so when you're creating that, was there any particular stumbling blocks? I feel like a good chunk of people, they're like, I want to write a book someday, and it's like, how many people do? Not that it's any kind of benchmark or whatever. I mean, nobody needs to write a book, but whatever your metaphoric book is,
sure.
It's a commitment, and you sit down and you have to do it, and it's a whole collaboration, it's a whole thing, and like, what was there any stumbling blocks during that time frame?
Creating a book about creativity was, the concept of, it was the meta hell, right? Because I'm writing about, advice for applying this to your life and about how to harness these potentials and how to, when you are stuck, these are the things that are valuable to employ to play through that. And I am getting stuck, and my mind is wandering, and I am not present, and I am not doing my best work. And, that's the meta narrative there has got to not be lost on anyone. But here's the deal. At the end of the day, sitting down and doing the work over and over, or in meditation's case, bringing your wandering mind back to your breath, or in the case of creativity, is I want to create my life. I need to strengthen the muscles of cooking dinners for my family and going home a different way every way, and building a great business that I love and making a family that I'm proud of. And it's all the same stuff, right? And it's a messy process, and it's really not the act of this perfect linear growth, right? It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The goal is that just the slope of the line is up and to the right. You're getting better at, with each iteration, and you're learning and then applying that knowledge. So, many points in the book, I had to go back and read earlier things that I had written in order to keep going and to complete it was such a trip. And I'm doing most of this writing. I like to write early in the morning and late at night. Early in the morning when I'm fresh and my best ideas are there, and my mind does a lot of work when I sleep. My sort of subconscious does. And then also when I'm tired, I'm just jotting things down that I don't want to forget, to prompt me to think about these things through the night and enable my subconscious to work. And those are the times when we as people are the weirdest, right? We're pretty normal in the middle of the day. We're having lunch. We're saying hi to our coworkers. We're going about our business. But early in the morning and late at night, and this is when I'm revisiting and visiting all of these ideas that I'm having, and where I'm stuck and writing about how to break through writer's block when you're blocked. It was a phenomenal experience. And in a way, I tried to capture that in the work. I do think there's enough of a personal experience and stories that most folks will be able to relate to, especially people, I wrote this book for the people who identify as creators and those who are creative curious. Like, I know I buy your argument, Chase, and I want to know how to maximize that and how to sort of unleash that in order to maximize my human experience. And for those that are, if you're sitting here as many scientists, I find, are the ones that have last to the party, and then they actually end up going the furthest with this material, because this expanded idea of creativity allows them to say they're creative and get on board. So there's only, the only people who are the book is not for are people that have considered my argument and think it invalid and don't want to be in charge of their own lives, or do not want to have a vision of them co-creating it. So don't get the book if you're in that camp. If you're anybody who's not in that camp, then my belief is that you'll benefit. So
I like we started finishing the podcast with like a 3 bullet point takeaway question that we include in the Align community, which I'll share in the outro where that is and where people can go if you're not familiar with it yet. But as you're going through that scenario, you're familiar with Stephen Pressfield, I'm sure. Have you ever done any work with him?
I haven't had Stephen on my show, or he has not taught on CreativeLive.
Do you want to?
We have mutual friends, but yeah.
Do you want to have him on?
Yeah, of course. I think.
All right, cool. I'll connect you guys, because I think that would be like such an obvious, amazing, just relationship. And I'd love to.
For sure. Obviously, I have read his works, and he's a brilliant thinker. Love the guy. Referenced him many times.
I figure. So within that, the resistance to doing the work, when you're in that place, and my tendency of resistance is to wash my shoes and continually scan through the refrigerator and see if somehow magically something has emerged that wasn't
new,
there.
Better food is in the closet.
Literally 6 minutes ago. It's amazing to watch. Like, the human creature is so like interesting and ridiculous, and so that's my resistance. There's other ones too, but there's the prominence. When you're in that scenario from your own life and from your own book and from just your experience, how do you navigate the resistance when you're in that place where you know what you need to do, and you're washing your shoes and you're looking through the fridge for the 25th time in the last 45 minutes? How does a person start to take control themselves as far as like actionable tips and tools?